My name is Chris Collier. I'm the Executive Director of Renew Theaters, which manages the Ambler Theater in Ambler, PA, the County Theater in Doylestown, the Highway Theater in Jenkintown, PA, and the Princeton Garden Theater in Princeton, New Jersey. And we are thrilled to have you all here for this virtual discussion. This is just one of many discussions that we have here. This is a standalone event, but we also have a couple ongoing series. This is a program that really we used to have in the theater, but then moved online during the pandemic, and have found that the online version has been really wonderful to bring a lot of different people together to have really insightful conversations. The program is sponsored by the Vesta Fund, which allows us to make these programs free, especially for our members. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who is a member of our theaters. Without your support, our theaters would not be operating. So thank you so much. We really relied on your support these past couple of years more than ever. The Vesta Funds grant has also allowed us to expand the program to invite other communities and other theaters to be part of this series. So we really want to especially invite anyone from the Majestic Theater community in Gettysburg, PA. They are the inaugural theater that joined our collective in terms of bringing this to more people. So welcome to anyone from Gettysburg area who's a member of the Majestic. A couple notes about upcoming programs. Just the first, as you've all noticed, we've actually made some updates in terms of registration, which we hope made things a little easier. Registration is now directly through Zoom. And for the ongoing series, so our Hollywood Classics series, which is monthly with Hannah Jack, and our French New Wave series, if you register for one of the events, you're registered for all of them. It's the same Zoom link for all of them. So once you're signed up, you have access. So hopefully that makes things easier for everyone, and we'll have more people participating. Also, we've been putting all of the past recordings of all of our other discussions on YouTube and on our website. So if you go to deepfocus.film, you can find any past conversations or discussions, and I hope you go check those out. We do have a couple really wonderful upcoming events. Next week, we have the second film in our French New Wave series, which is the discussion of the 400 Blows. And then the week following that, we have a discussion of Filibus, which is a 1915 Italian silent sky pirate caper film with a cross-dressing female lead. It is wacky and awesome, and a movie that everyone should really check out, because it's amazing how little film has progressed since 1915. It's pretty awesome all the way back then. Both of those movies, 400 Blows and Filibus, will be showing on screen at each of our locations, but you can also watch them at home. There are virtual options as well. Just a quick reminder of our Zoom protocols. For the beginning portion here, I'm going to just do a quick overview and lay out some history about Batman and some other key items that I think will feed into the conversation. Ask everyone to please remain on mute for that section, and then we'll open it up to conversation. I'm going to try and make my section as quick as possible so that we can dive into talking about the Batman and all of the other Batman films. We do have a fair number of people here tonight, so we're going to start by using the raise hand feature, and I can call on everyone just so that we're not stepping on each other's toes, but then we'll see how things go, and we can just open up the conversation. There's also the chat is enabled, so would invite anyone to type in the chat at any point. We tend to have a lively sidebar conversation of things that are going on. And I will try and check that while I can to bring that into the main conversation. So without further ado, let me see if I can share my screen, and we'll jump right in. Oh, I guess for those of you who didn't read my bio, I did write my master's dissertation on the music to the Batman films. I have a degree in musicology, and I wrote my dissertation on how the music sometimes undermined the director's vision for what Batman's character would be. And as you'll see in a second, as we dive into this, there are two really big conflicting personalities in Batman that play back and forth over the decades. So It was fun to research it then, and it was fun to put this presentation together, and I'm looking forward to sharing that all with you tonight. So let me share my screen here, and we will get started. Can everyone see that okay? Can I get a thumbs up? Great. All right. Just move my screen around. All right, before we get into some questions and discussions, again, I wanted to give a quick overview of Batman's history. And I think it's really important to understand Batman's comic history, because there's 50 years of comics and all sorts of different permutations of Batman that happened before the 1989 Tim Burton films that really influence the background of the character. Batman has been two different personalities from within the first year of his creation, and those personalities have battled it out over the decades, and it's given Batman a unique ability to morph and change to fit each decade and trend that he's been portrayed in. So we're going to quickly review Batman's origins and his first year, because that first year is really formative. Then do a really quick overview of Batman's history, then discuss how that's impacted his screen portrayals, but most importantly, his newest screen portrayal in The Batman. And then we'll open it up to some questions. Okay, so first off, let's look at this picture. Both of these are Batman, and both of these people feel are definitive versions of Batman. We have our Adam West board shorts surfing Batman and Robert Pattinson's grim emo detective Batman. They both coexist, and people really feel that either one can be the definitive Batman. How can that be? Well, to really understand Batman, we have to go back and start with Superman, because Batman is really defined by being not Superman. So in 1938, Action Comics #1 came out, premiering Superman as the first prototypical superhero comic book character. There was an incredible rush for everyone to copy that, as the comic trend was huge. Detective Comics, which actually handled Action Comics, that then went and sued anyone who made a character who was anywhere close to Superman. So the key thing to know about Batman is he is not Superman. Where Superman is an alien from another planet, Batman's just a guy. Where Superman can fly, Batman doesn't have any powers. Where Superman really does most of his stuff during the day, Batman's mostly at night. Superman is, during the day, mild-mannered reporter Clark Kent. Batman is lazy billionaire Bruce Wayne. There is a fascinating love triangle between Clark, Superman, and Lois in the Superman stories. Batman just kind of hangs out by himself. So right in the beginning, you have a definition of Batman that he is very definitively not Superman. And in that first year, you get some dark, grim, detective versions of Batman. Batman is really just prowling the night, looking for crime. There are no supervillains at this point. Everyone that we're dealing with is low-level mobsters or some crime bosses. But here's some shots from some of the first year of Batman's publication that just gives you a look of what Batman looked like at this time. I love this panel. This is just Batman throwing these guys off a pier, yelling, "Come on, suckers, happy landings." So that gives you kind of a feel right from the beginning that Batman is a little grim and menacing and really no fun to be around. That changes in 1940. So Batman number 20, or Detective 27 is the first Batman comic, and that's 1939. Less than a year later, we have Detective Comics 38, which introduces Robin. And I guess it was felt that Batman didn't have anyone to talk to, that it was maybe too dark or grim, and we needed to bring more kids into buying comic books. So what better way to do that than to introduce a a kid to join Batman on his quest for crime. And right there, we have the split that introduces the two different personalities in Batman. And right from the get-go, we go from that dark, brooding Batman to best dad ever Batman, who goes bronco riding with Robin. And this is just, a couple months later. They go sledding together on the bat sled. And here they are riding penny farthings together. I don't think you can get much further away from that grim, come on suckers, throwing them off the bridge than some of these covers. So this is all in the 1940s. And 1940s is actually when we have our first on-screen portrayal of Batman. It actually comes out of the comics, but it is a very different feel from anything that's going on here. So in 1943, we have Lewis Wilson as Batman in Columbia's 15-chapter serial. So these were films that ran before the feature film, and you'd have to come back on successive weeks to watch the story. And it brought Batman to life on the big screen. And then there was another follow-up serial in 1949, and Robert Lowry played Batman in this. And I just, looking at all of the talk of the new modern Batman costumes, you just gotta love these 1940s ones. They're pretty outstanding. Just a couple key things from this series, and we'll loop back to it. One, if you thought that Adam West looked silly in his Batman costume, I just had to put these pictures in of Batman and Robin running. It is very hard to take them seriously. But what the series did do is introduce the Batcave. This was one of the first instances of the Batcave. The main villain in this series was a very racist character named Dr. Daka. And the series really ended up being a propaganda piece against Japan and very boosterish towards the war effort. They're not very good, but it was the first time that Batman was brought to the big screen. All right, jumping ahead to the 1950s. After World War II, comic sales started to plummet, so the DC publishers decided that they needed ways to get comics moving off the shelves. And the best way to do that was to come up with crazy stories that kids would want to pick up, and seeing the cover, they had to understand what was going on. So you get really weird stories like Batman becomes Bat Baby, Batman, or the Rainbow Batman, where Batman has a different color suit for every occasion. We also have the Zebra Batman, where Batman gains superpowers and a zebra bat suit. And there's a point in which Batman becomes a genie. All of these comics really serve to set up the next on-screen persona of Batman, which is jazzy Adam West. The 1966 TV show starring Adam West and Burt Ward was a pop sensation, and was really some of the first time that people saw, or a lot of people saw Batman on screen and understood who Batman was. And this series was very campy, very arch, and again, it takes that Robin era Batman and pushes it to the far extreme. There was, of course, a backlash to this, and in 1970s, actually, it was December of 1969, Batman number 217 quickly closes the door on the Adam West era. So artist Neil Adams drew this more stark, realistic Batman, and Frank Robbins wrote this. But this period was really best known for Denny O'Neill's classic 1970s run. Batman leaves Wayne Manor, Robin goes off to college, and Batman moves downtown and into a penthouse suite and just starts cleaning up crime on the street. A lot of the bigger villains take a seat to the side, and Batman is back to his dark, grim, crime-fighting roots. So this is our first big swing back. So there's a great quote that I wanted to read. Comics historian Les Daniels observed that O'Neill's interpretation of Batman as a vengeful, obsessive-compulsive, which he modestly describes as a return to the roots, was actually an act of creative imagination that has influenced every subsequent version of The Dark Knight. And I think we will see this version of The Dark Knight is very prevalent in the Batman. Following the 70s run, Batman actually gets darker, and into the 80s, we have a series of very dark and actually increasingly violent versions of Batman. Frank Miller's seminal 1986, The Dark Knight Returns, shows an old grizzled Batman who returns to action. In 1987, there was an opportunity to reboot the Batman origin story, and Frank Miller wrote Batman Year One, which was also very influential in the new Matt Reeves' The Batman, which again brings Batman back to his loner pre-Robin days, very dark, atmospheric, very reminiscent of that first year. Also in those years, in 1988, there were two key comics, A Death in the Family, in which the Joker kills Robin, and The Killing Joke, in which the Joker injures Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, shooting her in the spine and paralyzing her. And I think this is probably the darkest point in Batman's history, and really gets quite violent. And that brings us up right to 1988, which is when Batman, the Warner Brothers movie, directed by Tim Burton, premieres. So now we're going to talk about quickly the different Batman on film. So when the casting was announced that Michael Keaton would be Batman, a lot of fans were absolutely panicked, expecting that we were going to see an Adam West goofy Batman return to the screen, because at this point Michael Keaton was best known for his comedic roles, but that's not what we got. We got an actual return to early Batman, to that first year. Tim Burton's Batman is incredibly gothic and dark, and as long as you can ignore the fact that downtown Gotham is just one block that they drive around in a circle, it is pretty wonderful and over the top. I think it goes a little too far in Batman Returns, but Michael Keaton has proved to be one of the most iconic of the Batman. And as I said, the second film that Tim Burton did pushes it a little too far, and it actually then caused the pendulum to swing back to camp Batman. So Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, which came out in 1995, brought Val Kilmer into the role. And that was followed up in 1997 with George Clooney taking on the mantle. And both of these revert to some of the puns and jokes of the 50s era and 60s era Batman. The villains are absolutely zany, and we've moved back into the Caped Crusader version. So there's the Dark Knight, who's your grim Year One Batman, and the Caped Crusader, who's your buddy Adam West Batman. So we've moved back into that world. Batman was rebooted again in 2005 for Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy with Christian Bale. And these films are a post 9/11 version of Batman that actually sees Batman leaving Gotham, and it takes a worldview. Batman is not just fighting mobsters and local crime, but trying to stop villains who are looking to take down the whole global order. And I think the most iconic of these films is the second one, The Dark Knight, which brings that title, that name, that grim version of Batman, in which featured Heath Ledger as the Joker. And I'd like to talk about villains a little bit in a second, so we'll come back to that. But I think the best summation of these is it kind of turns Batman into James Bond. It focuses a lot on gadgets. There's a number of world trotting adventures, and it's the most open and expansive of Gothams, even though it is shot in Chicago. I just have to note that Chicago is technically Metropolis, if you're doing the overlay of DC locations on a map. So I think it's very weird to have Gotham in Metropolis. But then we get the Snyderverse version of Batman. And I honestly must confess that I never saw Justice League. I couldn't get beyond the trailer. So I can't tell you much about these movies. I watched Batman v Superman. Ben Affleck is grumpy and old Batman, basically a play on the Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller. We're just going to ignore that these movies happened. They weren't very good. And then we have our Robert Pattinson Batman, which many critics have said is the most comics accurate portrayal of the Batman that brings us back to the idea of the world's greatest detective and is more of a murder mystery baked into the costume or the capes and cowls motif than instead of just the gadgets and the previous incarnations. I just want to loop back quickly to say that all of these different versions of Batman have opened the door to what I now call the world of infinite Batmans. That in the comics, there is now a comic of Batman 66, which has brought back the Adam West Batman. There is a separate comic of Batman 89, where the Michael Keaton Batman lives on. There have also been versions where Batman is a caveman, Batman is in the French Revolution, Batman is in Victorian times by gaslight. We've got Batman as a cowboy. We've got Batman as a vampire. And the rainbow suit Batman even returns in one of the animated series. So all of the different Batmans across time are now converging and have spread to cover all different sorts of media. There are three other versions of Batman on screen that I also just wanted to mention. Kevin Conroy voiced Batman in Batman the Animated Series, which premiered in 1993 after the Tim Burton series, and was actually the voice of Batman in the movie version of The Mask of the Phantasm, and has been the voice of Batman for many, many years, and actually has more Batman hours than any of the other Batmans combined. But I just have to note that in this world of infinite Batmans where Batman can be anything, we also have Will Arnett as Lego Batman. And coming out later this year in the DC superhero pets, Keanu Reeves is going to be Batman. So there are far too many Batman in the world. The last thing that I just really want to highlight, and then we'll open it up to conversation, is I actually feel that the best way to analyze Batman is to look at his villains. That I personally feel that a superhero is only as good as their villain, and their villain is used to bring out what makes the hero the hero. And the most interesting thing in looking at the villains from each of the generations is highlighting what each decade fears and what that Batman is used to battle against. So if we start with the 1940s, Batman is really patriotic, or as best as can be said, and fighting against an international threat. It is an undisguised racist attempt at an anti-Japanese sentiment, so that's baked in. The Batman, the movie and TV show, I can't take any of these villains seriously. They're just fun, and that kind of makes Batman fun. If the villains are wacky and kooky, then Batman is wacky and kooky. In the Tim Burton Batmans, the Joker starts as just a crime boss, and I think it gets progressively darker and weirder. I just had to put in that picture of Danny DeVito's Penguin. If anyone hasn't seen that in a while, That is a strange movie, and I'm glad that people just threw money at Tim Burton and let him do whatever he wanted, because it's very interesting. If you then look at the Schumacher films, it's very hard to find what the motivation of any of the villains are. They're really just trying to steal some stuff, and they are also very kooky and weird, and that makes it's hard to take the Batman who are fighting them all that seriously. And that's where the Nolan Batman gets very interesting, and I think is one of the first Batman to really give incredible depth to the villains. Ra's al Ghul is looking to, reset the world order and take down a major metropolis. He actually started in that 1970s Danny O'Neill run as an environmental eco-terrorist, which is a very interesting response to everything going on in the Earth Day movement. But I just really love Heath Ledger's Joker as a villain, because in The Dark Knight, you end up with an incredible spectrum of moral relativism, which ranges from Jim Gordon's following everything by the rule book, Batman choosing just his one rule that he's going to follow of not killing, but being able to bend all other rules. And then Heath Ledger's Joker, who has thrown out the rule book entirely and is all about anarchy. And that all then feeds into the fourth character in the film, which is Two-Face, who decides that if everything is relative, then why not just flip a coin? And that film, because the villains have such depth, it actually elevates the role of the hero to navigate all of those items. And in the most recent film, Paul Dano's Riddler is also a very interesting character in terms of him seeing himself as doing what Batman does and being a vigilante, and raises the questions along the lines of what is what Batman is doing just and legal, and where do those lines get drawn? And I think that it ties into a lot of contemporary issues in terms of what people feel that where they can take the law into their own hands. So I definitely would love to come back to this and hear anyone else's feedback in terms of the villains and how they factor in, because I think they are just as important, if not more, than the Batman that have been on screen for all those years. So with that, I would love to open things to questions, and if I can just pose a couple, I'd love to know what people thought of the Batman, and I'd love to know what everyone's favorite on-screen portrayal of Batman has been and why. So let me stop the screen share, and then I'll look for some raised hands. Brian.
Yeah, as far as the Batman, while I did enjoy the film and found a lot was good about it, a lot to enjoy, it was almost too dark, too gritty. It was like the PG-13 version of Seven or Zodiac. The Riddler was much more like the Zodiac killer than the Riddler. It was an interesting take. I enjoyed Robert Pattinson as the Batman, but his Bruce Wayne is basically a cipher. There's nothing to the character outside the costume, it seems, which is interesting because it's always been, theorized that his true identity is the Batman. Bruce Wayne is actually the mask. So I did enjoy the film. I got to admit, I was a little disappointed in it. Like I said, just so dark, and probably I would have liked it more if it wasn't 3 hours long, if they cut like 20 minutes out of it to kind of tighten up the pacing. And as far as favorite on-screen Batman, it's Michael Keaton. I was 18 years old when that film came out. I remember being one of the multitude of fans disgusted by the casting when I first heard. I can only imagine the uproar if the internet existed back then. But then once we saw that first trailer, everybody's opinion changed. Everyone couldn't wait for it. And those two films are just really great. And I love the wackiness and craziness of Batman Returns. It's the one blockbuster you really feel that there's one viewpoint, one auteur behind it, and he's a little crazy, and you just gave him way too much money. But I love it. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, those are great points. And I'll just note in the chat that you have many other who joined in with you who felt that the newest film was too dark. I want to get to another comment. I will just say that in the world of so many comic book movies, and especially all the Marvel films, which feel for the most part as that they're cut out of the same cloth. At least it was refreshing for someone to do something different and to try something and go in a different direction. So I'll just say that. Susan?
My first initial thoughts about the Batman, I think I loved the movie, and it probably I think Robert Pattinson was my favorite Batman by far. I loved how dark it was. I thought it was a really awesome take on the Batman character. And this might sound kind of funny, but I actually love Batman and Robin and Batman Forever. Like, they're just so like wacky and zany, and they're so like funny too.
Absolutely. No, and that's the one thing that I think, if there's any takeaway of however many years of Batman we have, is there's room for every different version of Batman. And I think the unfortunate thing about the film industry is some people feeling that there has to just be one definitive version, but I'm actually quite glad that Batman continues to bounce all over the place, and we get incredibly bad Arnold Schwarzenegger puns and Robert Pattinson's hair, all in the same world of Batman. Randy, you need to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you go.
I haven't seen the most recent one, but Christian Bale holds my heart. And he holds my heart for a couple of good reasons. The most impressive is that he used his own voice more than any of the other actors. There is no question that when you hear "I'm Batman," that you know who you're dealing with. There's also, I know you could talk about so many things, but there's a host of literature written with Batman in which he pursues international threats, the most impressive of which is by a guy named Andrew Vax, who wrote the Burke series, an incredible detective series about a man on the outside of the law, but he goes after child abusers and child traffickers. So does Batman in The Ultimate Evil, and I strongly recommend it. He travels internationally to thwart this terrible threat. I don't think Batman really gets much out of the United States, at least not to my experience. And I'm old enough to have read them way back when, probably even before you were born. But do you agree that the quality of sound in the films, both of himself as well as the villains, are considerably different? I think the third Christian Bale film had a wonderful villain voice. And what's the name of that guy? I'm sorry. The one who breaks
Bane,
Batman's
Tom Hardy?
Bane, yes, Bane. Bane has a voice, and a voice which, if you don't look at the screen, you still know who you're dealing with. And that's about it.
And that's, of course, there's a lot been discussed about Bane's voice, that if you watch the original trailer, The first time that they recorded Bane, no one could understand what he was saying. So they had Tom Hardy redo that voice. And it's a little more sing-songy the second time he did it. No, it is a very iconic sound. Anyone here want to, Russell? Yes.
Okay. I really enjoyed the Batman. Saw it last week. For my money, it was 15, 20 minutes longer than it needed to be, and I walked away mystified as to what the Penguin was doing in there. I didn't see how additive that character in that storyline really was, and I'd be interested in some explanation that would be satisfying to me about how where he fit in the puzzle of the crime that the Batman was really trying to get at and resolve, other than the introduction of the character of the Penguin, who may make an appearance in subsequent sequels.
Yeah, I think that's the best guess, is that he will be returning, and will have seen some things now and want to claim that crime empire for himself. But I also think he was used as a red herring, in some aspects, to sort of throw you off the scent.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, I just have to say, it was worth just seeing Colin Farrell in that makeup growling for a bit, and I would love to give him more screen time and see him do some more.
Yeah, that was unrecognizable. I mean, it was. I had to go look. I had to Google it and see that it was actually Colin Farrell. It was wild.
Keith?
But how exactly did the Batman change his enemies over time? Like the Riddler. In Batman Forever, he was kind of a costume clown who didn't really do much, but in the Batman, he's a sickening maniac who kills people for basically no reason. So my question is, how exactly did he change over time?
Sure, that's a great question. There are many different versions of the Batman villains all throughout the comics. So in 1940, the first appearance of Robin. The next issue is the first appearance of the Joker. And the first thing that the Joker does is capture Robin and try and poison him. So right off the bat, the Joker is the Joker, and goes after Robin, and that becomes a trope throughout the rest of the comics and Batman's history. But they're all different types of Jokers. And each different comic artist over time in each of the movies has decided to put a different spin on the villains. So they're not all the same. I think the best way to think about it is they're versions of the character, but each of them is from a different universe. So they're just like different universe versions. Does that help?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yeah, hi. So one, Chris, I want to say, thank you for the vaccinated days. It's been a really long time since we were into the theater. My youngest is 11. He was so excited to see Spider-Man. We went to a regular theater. It was chaos. I actually felt like I was kind of in the Riddler's world a little bit. So it was kind of cool to go to the highway and know that we could be there. And in relation to kind of your specialty, the newest Batman for me was not only returning to that theater experience with a kind of really awesome film, but experiencing that immersive sound. I felt like, even though this Batman film, I'm in the camp of it was 20 minutes too long, not to spoil it, but once we get the Riddler in the cafe, I was like, okay, I'm done. We don't need the rest of that. But especially because it seems so counterintuitive to what he had set up, in relation to the storyline of trying to take out bad guys, and then suddenly, it's kind of chaos, right? But the sound of this film was just so phenomenal. And I walked, we live in Jenkintown, so me and my two boys walked home, and every time we turned a dark corner, because we saw it like, at 5 and left at 8, like I just heard that, right? That sound is just there. And whoever was talking about like 7, right? I mean, this is 7, it's Zodiac. And for me in particular, I'm of the age, as you can tell by my backgrounds, that the animated Batman is what hooked me. I was an X-Men kid growing up through and through. My oldest son is named Xavier, partially because of, so I mean, the Dark Knight series, but like that noir of the animated Batman, never mind that Luke Skywalker is the Joker. But like, I'm an English teacher. And so the first season, The Heart of Ice, Mr. Freeze episode is so beautiful. I show my kids it. And so that is what brought me into the Dark Knight world. I remember seeing the Michael Keaton and enjoying it, but it was the animated series. But really more something that kind of, for me in particular, was the Arkham Asylum and then the Arkham City games. The Riddler of this film very much felt like that Arkham City, where, and that movie kind of emulated, I think, a little bit of that too, where like it just kind of felt a lot like that PlayStation series. And I loved it. It was amazing to go back into a theater again. I think the series is in good hands, and so I look forward to seeing where it goes.
Great comments. Thank you. Yeah, that's one of the great things, I think, about this new wave of superhero films is that a lot of the directors know that the fans are paying attention. And unlike something like the Tim Burton films, which I feel are cut from their own cloth entirely, especially this Batman, I mean, it references, the so many different classic Batman comic arcs and the video game, and it pulls in different things so that anyone coming from sort of any previous vantage point of Batman can find something, a toehold in, which is kind of cool. Mary?
Hey, everybody. I just wanted to mention first of all, I love the Batman. And I love this incarnation of Batman. There was only one scene, like I did not mind the length at all. I enjoyed the entire thing. There's only one scene that like pulled me out of it and made me go, wait, why? So over and over again, I had read about the Batmobile, how everybody's loving this car. This car is amazing. People want this car. And then the sound of this car, Glenn had just talked about like the sound of this movie. When that thing fired up, you're like, what is coming? And it was great. Okay, then the Batmobile proceeds to cause so much chaos in pursuit of the Penguin. There is like, how many people are dead across this freeway because he has to catch up to the Penguin? He catches up to the Penguin and he like casually asks a question and then it's answered in a fashion he doesn't really like. And then that's the end of the scene. Like there's this massive car chase to get to that scene. And then it's kind of like, yeah, whatever. And I'm just thinking about like, how many people just died so you could go catch up with that guy? It doesn't make any sense. It was literally the only scene in the entire thing that I felt there was no justification for it at all. And it drove me crazy. So anyway, that is my only negative note about the entire movie because I loved it.
Thank you. I will note that there is one, I'll have to look it up. I can't remember which one, but there is one comic run and one of the tropes in it is there is a Gotham recovery fund that is used to pay for all of the damage that Batman creates. So I think that is a fun. It then ends up with someone trying to steal that money or reuse it. But I think that the idea that there has to be a special recovery fund for each of these things, yeah, that car chase is perfect on that. Brendan.
Yeah, so I really love the Batman. I think my favorite interpretation has always been the Kevin Conroy animated series. Probably second to that would be the Burton Keaton films. That's what I primarily grew up with. But that cartoon and those films were really visually appealing and spectacular production design and the look. And I felt like the Batman you know, as you mentioned, you know, we sat through probably the last 10 years of Marvel movies. Just everything kind of has gotten to look pretty bland, very gray, very flat. And it was interesting to see. It was nice to see a film that actually looked visually spectacular for one of these comic book films in a very long time. And I really, you know, I really enjoyed Pattinson's portrayal as Batman. It's nice to see a Batman film with Batman in it. And it's kind of weird to go back. I recently rewatched Batman Begins, which was one of my favorite Batman films for a long time. And to see how much Bruce Wayne is in that, compared maybe to 3 or 4 scenes with the Batman, and to see this film primarily feel like it was ripped straight from the comics, where you're not getting a lot of Bruce Wayne, you're getting Batman investigating a murder throughout this 3-hour runtime, which, as far as pacing goes, I think it differs for everybody. For me personally, I could have asked for probably another hour, but that's just the fanboy in me for that. But it was cool, and it was nice to see you know, with some of these comic book films, sometimes they bring in a villain, kill him off, and that's the villain or character they're focused on throughout the majority of the movie. It was nice to see an ensemble. You get a little bit of the Riddler, you know, he's the main antagonist, but a little bit of Penguin, Carmine Falcone, a lot of Catwoman. I felt like they did a really spectacular job of portraying Catwoman in film, probably for the first time since Michelle Pfeiffer in '92. So yeah, I was a big fan. I'm looking forward to see where Matt Reeves goes with this interpretation.
So I just wanted to add one comment on what you mentioned in terms of the look, and I just need to call out Greg Fraser's cinematography. And this has been a good year for Greg Fraser, who's up for an Academy Award for his work on Dune. And Brendan, you had mentioned that everything in the Marvel films feels flat and gray. And I think one of the things that really stands out in the Batman is how much is shot in a real set with real lighting and not using a green screen. And it feels like many of the superhero films that we've seen recently all have, you know, an animated background and a green screen look, and that adds to that lack of depth and that flatness. And I think so. Greg Fraser has done a lot with really trying to figure out ways to use natural light. And there's some really cool articles you can find about how he did that for Dune, and, you know, reflecting natural sunlight into the stages and things to make Arrakis feel so bright. And it's crazy to think of the use of light in a movie which is so pitch black and dark. But the way that he's actually able to get the light to work in a lot of different places, and to not have to, and to do it in a real feeling world. I mean, that's the other thing that's really neat, I think, about this film, is Gotham feels big, you know, it feels like a real place. And yeah, I rather enjoyed how he was able to capture that visually. Before we get to you, Susan, I did have a question in the chat. Someone wanted to know about the music. And I have not had a chance to really analyze the score to the Batman too much. I don't know if I would have picked Michael Giacchino. Michael Giacchino is best known for some of the work that he's done with the Pixar films, and I felt that there was far too much use of harp in the movie that really stood out for me for some odd reason. It really contrasted with a lot of the lower growly bass notes that were the Batman theme. The harp was really reminiscent of Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman theme from Danny Elfman's score in Batman Returns, so that's probably why he went to that. But I think one of the challenges in all of these movies is finding a score that can match with the sound effects, and figuring out how to get the music to come through when you're hearing all of those growls and other things happening in the background. And he did a really good job of doing that. Not my favorite Batman score though. Susan?
So when you said like about like the lighting and like the sets, my first like initial thought was like how they did like the background screen in The Mandalorian. And I was like how like visually stunning it looked and like how realistic it looked.
Yeah, so he actually Greg Fields actually helped develop that as well, and it's a new technique of using a whole LED screen that is behind the actors and above the actors, and creating the whole look behind so that you can actually visually do the lighting on that screen and actually light naturally. So I believe he actually did the cinematography for Rogue One, and there's a great scene in there where an X-wing is doing a barrel roll, and if you had just shot it on a green screen, the lighting wouldn't have changed. But they actually use that new LED setup, and some actual practical effects so that you actually get the lighting change of how the light would actually potentially look, if you were doing a barrel roll in an X-wing flying that close to a planet. Yeah, there are a bunch of new articles out right now because Greg Field, I think, is the leading or is most likely to win Best Cinematographer Academy Award on Sunday for his work in Dune. So if you're interested in that, do some Googling, and there's some really, really cool stuff about the work he's been doing. John?
I would say a Batman was a great reboot, because you're talking the Dark Knight trilogy is probably the second best trilogy on Lord of the Rings, and it's way ahead of Star Wars. It's way ahead of the Godfather trilogies. Yes, it's dark, but he's going a whole different route. And like I said, the Dark Knight trilogy is hard to top. You've got to look at that as its own, specific animal, so to speak. Christian Bale remains my favorite, but Robert Pattinson's a close second. Catwoman, I tend to go more towards Anne Hathaway because it's true to the comics of her being a cat burglar. But I thought Zoe Kravitz was just as good. And like I said, Christian Bale would probably be the best for me. The one thing I like about the new one, as well as the Nolan trilogy, is the fact that they don't rely on CGI, as you said earlier. It's all really special effects driven. And that's nice to see compared to the MCU, where it's basically the same shots being recycled into different films.
Thank you for your comments. John Toner, before we get to you, I just want to know, does anyone here, is Adam West their favorite Batman? Can anyone stand up for Adam West? No? All right, John Toner?
Well, you have to admit that's the best music, right? That's the Batman theme. So first of all, the length of the movie, I completely agree with Brendan. It could have gone longer. I was amazed how, I'm usually one of those people who does say, it could have been, I liked it, but it could have been 20 minutes shorter. For some reason, the pacing on this went really smoothly, and I was surprised that it didn't seem as long as it was. And actually, it is only 2 hours and 47 minutes to the end credits. The end credits are 13 minutes long. And that's actually shorter than The Godfather. So there's that. Glenn mentioned it. I really liked what Brian said. He really nailed it when he called it a PG-13 version of Zodiac or Seven. I think that totally hit it on the head. It really had that feel, that it was against a sort of crazed serial killer rather than, some sort of supervillain or a villain, comic book type villain. So I really liked that darkness and that kind of reference to those movies. But Chris, I went in on your recommendation that there would be aspects of not only The Godfather, not only the films that I mentioned, but films like The Big Sleep or Chinatown. And I need for you to tell me where there was Chinatown, and that's a challenge to the moderator.
Thank you, John. I did not. I said that there were flavors of. So definitely in the detective feel of it, but we can parse the answers later.
I did like the fact
Yeah.
that it was, like you were saying, it is more of a detective. He's trying to solve a crime, which is by a criminal rather than, and that is totally Dark Knight. So
Yeah, and that's
that
that's
was
one of the, if you look back at some of the other villains and things that Batman has faced over time and in the other movies, it's not a cash grab. It's not the, especially the Joel Schumacher films. Those villains are just trying to steal money or
right.
break into a bank. And it sets up some interesting set pieces, but this has a longer arc. And I guess the big sleep for me is sort of, the big sleep has a lot of wrong turns in terms of how the detective is going through the story. It's not a straightforward, obvious, um, way through. And I feel that it played with that a little bit. And I think, using the Penguin as a red herring to just sort of pull, one storyline off. And you know what, I will agree that I think the ending does go off the rails. I thought it was an excellent movie up till the coffee shop scene as well, and it needed that. I think Warner Brothers made them put in that big splash ending. But if anyone knows the comic run in I'm blanking on it. Brendan, what's the name?
Zero Year.
Not Zero. Well, Zero Year in
Yeah,
particular.
No
but
Man's Land.
No Man's Land. Yeah, there's a
Cataclysm.
yeah, Cataclysm in No Man's Land, in which there's an earthquake which levels Gotham. There's references to that throughout the end of the film. And there's a recent run called 0 Year, in which Riddler basically does the same thing to Gotham. So it is a direct nod to one of the most recent comic arcs. Up until that point, I feel it could be a fairly standard murder mystery, but then it goes off the rails a bit.
And I guess it's like Chinatown in that it's slowly unpeeling the pervasive corruption of society and this particular city, which is at its core completely rotten.
Yeah, I should have said
Okay.
Taxi Driver. It has the Taxi Driver narration to start. That is definitely in there too.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is
okay, I'll accept that.
Yeah. But it's definitely a reference to that 1970s Batman, and then pulling in 1970s films and flavor as well. So, all right, one last try. Anyone want to defend Adam West? Nothing. I think we've had all the other Batmans.
I love the Adam West campiness and craziness of it. It was either that, watching old reruns of that, or Super Friends was my first introduction of the character. And I mean, watching the Batman series is great fun. I would go in from playing every day to watch that for half an hour, because there was nothing else on TV like that. It was just unadulterated fun. And I still watch them just because it is so enjoyable and candy colored.
Thank you, Brian. Brendan?
Yeah, I'll defend Adam West a little bit. And I think you see a little bit in the Batman how they design. I think I read an article where they designed his mask to almost resemble a little bit like Adam West, and a lot of the cast and crew grew up with that version. Also, kind of feel like Paul Dano in his interrogation scene kind of goes into a little bit of a Frank Gorshin manic mood with his performance. There's a little Frank Gorshin, little Jim Carrey in there, but I feel like of all the live action interpretations of Batman, I feel like Adam West, you could almost justify a live action version of Robin with the Adam West version. I think it would be hard to. I'd be curious to see if they try with Matt Reeves, but with all the other interpretations, I think it's very hard. The closest they got was Batman Forever, Val Kilmer, but that kind of came off a little weird because they had to age up Chris O'Donnell to almost be a 18, 20-year-old man. That's like, it doesn't really jive. Why is he taking this older guy to live with him? I feel like Adam West and that version with Robin, that's the, if I imagine Robin on screen in live action, it's the Adam West version.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued to see what they do with Robin. It's a very hard character to bring to fruition. Lauren?
I was just gonna throw a few 2 cents in there for Adam West. Just like, I feel like Adam West is so on a level of his own when it comes to Batman. Like, it's so uncomparable to everything else of the modern Batman. The Adam West movie was on the other day, and it was just the scene where he's carrying the bomb around on the dock, desperately trying to find a place to throw the bomb in the water, and he runs into the same woman with the baby carriage like 3 times, and the nuns twice. And it's just so over the top ridiculous that it's perfect in that craziness. It's almost too Mystery Science Theater for Mystery Science Theater. And it's just, there's so much fun and so goofy. And I love that all the bad guys hang out together, have their own hideout, and that they seem to have cubbies like they're in a kindergarten. It's just so its own universe. That's it.
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank all of you for joining me tonight to talk about this film and share your thoughts on Batman. It was great to hear everyone's feedback, and I'm glad that a lot of you enjoyed the film and came to the theater to check it out. It was definitely a little outside of our wheelhouse, but we're really glad that we were able to bring something different and interesting and something that brought so much discussion out of everyone. So thank you for choosing to spend your night with us here, and hope to see you at future conversations and at the theater.
Thank you, Chris. Great job. It was really interesting, the presentation. What's your next topic?
Don't know. We'll see.
All right. People, suggest what Chris, he did a good job. He should do more. Suggest something.
All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.